Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/home soon.
CHEK Podcasts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Political Capital, your source for all the latest in BC politics. I'm your host, Rob Shaw, coming to you from the CHEK News Command and Control Center here in Victoria. The Seas are angry, my friend, like an old man trying to return soup at the deli, a classic Seinfeld line that applies this week to the outrage facing BC Ferries for contracting with the Chinese government to build new ships. We're going to delve into those turbulent waters, plus a look at BC's new political party, OneBC, with Dallas Brodie and Armstrong, and some other topics. Thank goodness we have our political life raft in the form of our panel here to get us through this. Jillian Oliver, Allie Blades, Jeff Ferrier, thank you for being here, helping us stay afloat. I've run out of the metaphors of the turbulent times for BC Ferries, but it was not a good week for them. This deal with the state-owned, government-administered Chinese shipyard to build 4 new vessels did not go over well. New ships good. Ships from brutal communist regime that is hostile force against Canada bad seem to be the summary of pretty much everyone. Let's start there. Jeff, through completely random draw, you were the first up on this issue. So tell us what you think about this and whether it is going to fly.
No, but it might sink. BC Ferries has embarked on a strategy that if they do something massively unpopular and they just explain it right, then the public's going to fall in line. And it's the exact opposite, and no one should be surprised by that. You hear BC Ferries, they're talking about we need the boats, we need a fair and open RFP. The Chinese company was the successful bidder. It's going to save $1.2 billion in cost to the taxpayer. Not landing great. And it strikes me that there's 2 issues here on the political front. One is governance. It strikes me that the BC government is paying the price for decisions it's made about how Ferries is run. They get the worst of both worlds. They're quasi-independent, so there's a board and management team who can make decisions like this one, and government doesn't have control over that. But the other side is that people blame them no matter what because they set up the board, and it's people just sense Ferries is government. The second thing, and I think it's the one that people are talking about more, is just capacity to build ships in a maritime province like British Columbia. They point back to World War II and said when we needed boats, we could make them ourselves. We could stand on our own 2 feet and get these things done. And here we have a situation where there's no one in Canada, apparently, who can bid on this because we don't have the capacity to build marine vessels, be they ferries or in these turbulent geopolitical times, potentially military vessels. And so I think there's an opportunity for businesses to step in and fill the void. And if they won't, then I think federal and provincial governments need to consider all options for how we build ships in this country.
Jillian, the argument back from BC Ferries, and Jeff touched on it there, and it is coming through the government a little bit as well, is people aren't going to care about this. They just want ships. They just want new ships. They're tired of this. China will build them. You buy lots of stuff from China in your own personal life. This is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. Did that fly, do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of a tell on how they made the decision. It takes time to build these ships and for them to deliver. I think they are looking at all of the other mounting financial problems that the province has, as well as, potential looming recession, and if not recession, lots of uncertainty and turmoil in the economy, and thinking that the alternative, if they got what they say would be a doubly more expensive ship from Europe, that would be a bigger political problem for them in a couple of years. And I think that is I think there's an argument that could very well be the case. I think right now there's this argument, this big conversation sort of about protectionism and who our trading partners are because of what's been happening with Trump and all of that. I think that in a couple of years it very well could be a bit of a different conversation where the economic reality of things like the recession and all of these things that are sort of coming down the pipe very soon are being more felt in people's day-to-day lives, and the cost is the bigger potential risk.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right there. I think Ferries is hoping that by the time these things arrive in 2028 or whatever, that different environment, maybe better relationship with China, maybe we have mended those fences to get around the Americans. You're right. I think it's an important part of it. Allie, the opposition to this, though, has been huge from provincially all the way to the House of Commons in Ottawa. Questions about national security, questions about whether it's safe to build our West Coast passenger ferry fleet from a hostile government, and even some tying it into national economic pipeline type of criticism that the government has been making as well. What stood out for you in the way that the criticism coalesced? Is it normal? Is it unique? What do you think?
I think it's normal for these times. I think that it was an opportunity for opposition to really characterize the NDP government as this anti-Team Canada in a time where David Eby, when convenient, talks about that we need to start building things more here and investing more here. It's one of these cases where they have successfully labeled David Eby as this premier who is unable to read the room. What you pointed to was that on a federal level, we had Jeff Kibble, who's our member of parliament from Vancouver Island, point this out and ask Chrystia Freeland, the transportation minister, if the federal government's going to support the money that they send over to BC Ferries. And then there's been some criticism of, what does this mean for BC jobs? Now, I think that the opposition did their job. Great, wonderful, big win for us this week in that we're holding the government accountable. But to be fair to the NDP, I think that there's still an opportunity here to come out of this a little bit better in that all they have to do is talk about and lean into how the maintenance for this is going to be invested in Canadian jobs. All they have to talk about is how this is a savings for other things. So that what I mean by that is that, they got the most cost effective, most economical a bid for a reason. And so that money could mean that right now we can put it to other things that critically need our attention when it comes to the budget. But it's hard to do that as the NDP because it just seems that every week we're talking about how they're really not launching these programs in a way that is a good narrative for them. So I think it's because it's just been like failure after failure that the NDP are really kind of in this corner right now.
Mm-hmm. What do they do, Jeff, do you think? Like, is it, given the dynamics here, and there's both the defense of the ideas, as Allie has said, of saving money, but then the argument that BC Ferries is independent, which it really isn't. It has a sole shareholder, which is the provincial government. And then there's different lanes that eventually at some point the premier is going to have to stand there and talk about and articulate how this fits or doesn't fit into the values of his government. How do you think those lanes kind of come together, and what do you think he should be doing here?
Yeah, I think the obvious thing that most folks would say is that he should cancel the RFP, reissue it, and exclude state-owned enterprises from bidding. The challenge with that is that the genie's out of the bottle, the contract's been signed, and the way that the governance is set up, there's no opportunity for government to do that. So, what I would suggest that the government do if it wants to regain its footing on this, and I think Allie makes some good points about some short-term steps that it can take focused on the jobs from maintenance. I think, looking over the mid to long term, I think they need to consider whether they bring it back as a crown, where if government's going to wear the criticism, if it's going to pay a political price for decisions made by a quasi-independent company, then just bring it back in-house and make the decisions in-house and deal with the consequences if they come your way, if the decisions are bad. And I think the other thing we need to look at is, I saw unions, I saw building trades, I saw a business talking about, well, this is a betrayal of Canadian workers and Canadian jobs. Government needs to look at how they can get Canadians working in this field, businesses able to deliver on the things that Canadians want in terms of, not just ferries, but potentially military vessels. And we don't have that now. And if I were government, I would lean into we need to stand on our own 2 feet. We need to have this capacity ourselves. And so I would look at governance, and I would look at how to finding ways to make sure that we can build boats like this in Canada.
It is weird. And for those wondering why there was no Canadian bids on this, we do have C-SPAN, it's a big shipyard, but it's filled to capacity apparently by one or two.
With one boat, one or two boats.
Building a Coast Guard and a military vessel has sort of maxed out the capacity. And I guess the question is, do we try to create more capacity? And who does that? Is that a government? Is that a private industry thing? How do you do it? Jillian, I want to go back to the issue of values, though, and it's been touched on here. And just to go back to how the Premier is going to have to address this, you have the Team Canada stuff that he's been talking about, fast-tracking. He's passed legislation to fast-track growing our economy. You have a government that spends extra money, capital money, on community benefits agreements because it believes public money has to have a public good. And you have a Premier who's talked a lot about China, foreign interference, money laundering, all sorts of concerns he's had about the Chinese government, fentanyl exportation and chemical precursors. How does he navigate that? And Jeff, I think, touched a little bit on it, and Allie touched a bit on it. If he's not going to reverse it, how does he align his values, do you think, with not acting on this?
I think Jeff had a good point about having a plan for the future. I think that this can really be looked at as a sort of a failure of government to have sort of like a longer term planning strategy and getting caught kind of dealing with issues in a reactionary way. And when you don't have a long-term strategy for growing the economy and for your theory of what that looks like and your vision, you're going to end up with all of these inconsistencies. I also think it brings to mind for me LNG Canada, which is a conglomerate of foreign companies. They exempted them from steel tariffs, so it was prefabricated in China and shipped over here. I think government, they have these four-year terms, and they get so distracted by shiny objects, they forget to do the long-term planning to end up with a cohesive vision that, makes a decision about the things that we want to invest in for the long term, and then it ends up kind of blowing up when you get painted into a corner with big decisions like this and having no options. So I think showing that talking about that openly, admitting that it's not a great that we don't have a lot of choices in this situation, and here's what we're going to do about it, I think is really the only way to sort of square that circle, and you have to acknowledge it and then talk about how it's going to be different in the future.
Hey, you want to talk about long-term vision? I was reading an op-ed from Claire Tavenna when she was an opposition ferries critic in 2014 when BC Ferries contracted out to build ferries overseas and said, we got to create a shipbuilding industry. This is a government, a liberal government that for political reasons hasn't done that. It's outrageous. Goes on to become the transportation minister in charge of BC Ferries, does jack nothing on that issue. Now is on the BC Ferries board, apparently doing jack nothing about it as well. So you talk about a vision all the way through over a period of like 10 years. I don't. No one has ever bothered to talk about that because they cannot seem to foresee that we need to replace the ships and get out in front of that ahead of time. Jeff.
Yeah, I think that's all right. I just wanted to note that I think the biggest political risk for the Premier and the government right now is how far off this is the government narrative around jobs and economic development. And we'll talk about it later in terms of approvals of the Premier. But here's a guy who's been having his approvals boosted by being seen to be the fighter against Trump, as the guy who's standing up for BC's economy and fast tracking projects. And here you have something that is completely the opposite of that. Yeah. So it's unfathomable to people that this is happening, and that creates a big risk for the Premier and his government.
Just to close it off with you, Allie, I just want to Jason Kenney's line, which former Premier of Alberta, which was something along the lines of, if BC and David Eby intend to oppose a new oil pipeline in the national economic interest, that they're going to throw giving billions of dollars to the Chinese government back in the face of this Premier. If that takes off, does that change the dynamic of what the NDP government has to do here?
Well, that's exactly what we're talking about, is that it seems that David Eby right now, to Jeff's point, is saying one thing about the BC Ferries, but then on the oppositional side, when we're talking about this hypothetical pipeline, it's this narrative of, I'm saying no to investment in BC. We're not really gearing up for an opportunity to say, okay, yeah, maybe right now our only option is China, but let's fix it for the future. Let's say that we are open for business in BC, which is something that he just has been unable to do. And so I think that's the core of what former Premier Jason Kenney is trying to say, is that this is a missed opportunity, and in BC we're just saying no to everything.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's really kind of the federal government has a big role if they want to create and develop a national shipbuilding industry too. I don't think the province can do it by itself. Maybe that's an opportunity for the new Prime Minister. I want to move on to another topic here. OneBC, the new party on the political scene, announced this week from Vancouver Kilchena's Dallas Brodie, the interim leader, and Kelowna Lake Country Coldstream's Tara Armstrong, two of the three Conservative MLAs who quit that caucus and have been sitting as independents. Jeff, we'll just start with you on this. Who does this party benefit and hurt, and what do you make of it being the fourth party on the political scene now? I guess fifth if you count Centre BC, but that doesn't have any MLAs yet.
Yeah, first it benefits the OneBC party, because they're now going to get tens of thousands of dollars from the Legislative Assembly to hire staff and do work. So this is a party that's talking about cutting taxes, and meanwhile they're going to benefit from government largesse in that way. I think it's an opportunity for the BC Conservatives, for being honest. They're trying to establish themselves as more of a reasonable, centrist, safe option for voting, having people who take extreme issues, positions rather, like we're going to privatize healthcare, mass immigration is destroying Canada, and lower thresholds for recall campaigns, which is kind of funny because Dallas Brodie should probably be the focus of a recall campaign. Look, this is a party that claims it wants to unite the province. In practice, it's looking to turn British Columbians against British Columbians. I think there's a long tradition in Canada of grievance being masked by populism. I think that's certainly the case here. It's sad to see unity used as a weapon, and grievance dressed in populist tones, and the result is never good when this happens writ large. And to be clear, it's not just this party that's doing this. There are some aspirants to leadership in the BC Conservative world who are doing this as well. So I think it's dangerous, to be honest.
Okay, Jillian, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an absolutely shocking lack of self-awareness to call yourself OneBC when all of your key issues are like divisive culture war issues that are, only a very small segment of the population is really focused on. I think it could be a little bit of a headache for the Conservative Party. We've talked in recent episodes about John Rustad facing a leadership review. Jeff pointed out the sort of opportunity side, and I think at the end of the day, they do need to choose an identity in politics. If you don't do that, the opposition will do it for you. And I think that's why the NDP squeaked by last time, is they were able to sort of frame the Conservatives a bit better than they were able to frame themselves, because they were not disciplined. So I think it's really going to come down to, can the Conservative Party be disciplined, whether Rustad survives a leadership review, or they have another leader that they think can do that better. And if that leadership contest can actually like be unifying for the Conservative Party itself. But yeah, I mean, it really changes the dynamic of the topics that were being talked about in the legislature. There's been a huge shift in that in the last 2 years, since the emergence of the Conservative Party, and I don't think it's for the better.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, yeah, topics we've never heard on the floor of the legislature before. Allie, is it a legitimate risk to the Conservatives, a benefit to the Conservatives, or is it more like the People's Party federally, which maybe didn't coalesce into anything?
Well, let's think about this in terms of what was different earlier this week versus now. I mean, we didn't really hear anything when the three independents were sitting in the legislature of major issues that they were advocating successfully. And
sometimes they didn't even vote.
Yeah, absolutely, right? To now they have a party of two. Mind you, one of the independents, Jordan Keeley, is not included in this website, and so for reasons unknown, but there's politically, how does this affect us on the center right? It means that by forming a political party, they have a little bit more ammunition for candidate recruitment, for fundraising on the partisan side. And so I think that by opening this door, it is now opening the door for a ton of judgment from people like us of, okay, well, you're saying that you're going to do X, Y, Z. This is the preview of what their potential policy platform could look like for the next election. Whereas if they had just stayed as the independents, we wouldn't really worry or care about these things. But now it's, I guess, official. And so let's see. Now we're going to be able to compare their fundraising numbers to the BC Conservatives. And, God forbid that they are able to actually raise a little bit more. And I can only imagine the type of candidates that they're going to be able to recruit. And so that's kind of the stuff that we're thinking of when it comes to, well, what's the dynamic politically between the two parties.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot more to discuss on this issue, but we're at a time here in the video and a YouTube portion of the show. Make sure you subscribe to the audio podcast. We're going to carry this conversation forward and some other topics as well. Thank you to the panel for being here. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week with all the latest in BC politics here on Political Capital. Political Capital is brought to you by Uber Canada. Learn how Uber and Mad Canada are reducing impaired driving at uber.com/home soon.